Hi, welcome to In the Cann with Carmella Cann. Today's episode is about anti-LGBTQ bills being about erasing transgender people from public life. We have three guests today, and our first guest is Leslie Ann. She's a transgender woman, she's a professional musician, and she's a Republican. We have Thomas Duane, who's a former New York State Senator and former New York City Council member, and he is a Democrat. And we also have Josie, who's a transgender woman. She works as a mental health worker, and she's an independent voter. So, to give you a little framing, more than 20 Republican led states have passed bills uh, uh, regulating the lives of transgender children and adolescents uh, since 2021. According to NBC, over 500 anti LGBTQ bills were proposed in 2023, and 75 were made into law in 23 states. Recently, a 16-year-old non binary teen died after a fight in Oklahoma high school where they were being bullied for the non and they identified as non-binary.
There are new details today about the death of an Oklahoma teenager the day after a physical altercation in a school restroom. Nex Benedict, who was non-binary, attended high school in Owasso, a suburb of Tulsa. Police say that an investigation is ongoing. But Nex's death is raising concerns in LGBTQ+ communities and igniting fear in some families and among students who identify as queer.
Senator, do you think that these bills are creating an environment that is bringing up bullying and, unsafety for transgender people and non-binary?
I do think that that is one of the impacts. Absolutely makes it very difficult for young people in school, elementary through high school. But it also can make it very dangerous for transgender women in general who may hold marginal jobs. So it puts them in really grave danger of being murdered. Kids, yes, in some extreme cases, getting killed, but absolutely being bullied more. These bills give permission to other young people to bully gender nonconforming classmates.
Leslie, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that these bills that have been proposed are putting transgender people in unsafe situations and creating an environment that's unsafe?
As a longtime Republican, and all my life I've been registered mostly Republican, um, I have to say that the Republican Party is wasting their time too much on this issue. They need to go back to the more important issues that have nothing to do with blacks, trans, or any other kind of minorities or racial groups. They need to focus more on safety, on the economy and the environment. I don't understand why a lot of these Republicans are wasting their time on something that doesn't affect their daily lives.
I mean,
I think
it seems like Republicans are very focused on culture wars. And I mean, what do you say
hey,
when you say you're transgender and Republican? I mean, there's a lot of transgender people who would say that you're kind of voting for people who are trying to work against you. Like, what's your response to that?
well, I don't agree with them 100%, obviously, and the reason why I do vote Republican in most cases, I'm going to have to say, is because I agree with the Second Amendment. I agree with putting a stop to certain things that are going on, that like immigration problems. I'm sorry, I'm not anti-immigrant. There's nobody really is, but take for example, there's a lot of misunderstandings there. I believe that the Republican agenda has a lot more fiscal items that I agree with, but unfortunately the cultural wars, the social agenda is the one thing that I cannot back them with.
So those things are
But I,
higher for you, those than necessarily the transgender bills on your. Would you say that or not?
well, I don't know if I agree with that.
Okay,
Because I think that when you think look at 20 states versus 50 states, that means 30 states Republicans are not worried about it. I think that most people need this. I think it's in the more conservative states where they are trying to. They got nothing better to do but look for a fight, and that's what I. That's how I feel about the Republican Party. Is that uh, I, most of us don't just want fairness, and I think more of their agenda is all about fairness. But unfortunately, I'm not gonna defend them on the culture war issue.
got it. Josie, how about you? I mean, you identify as an independent. Again, a lot of transgender women or, a lot of LGBTQ people, if you're not a Democrat, are like surprised. Um, Josie, what are your thoughts on that? Like, have you ever, found people to say anything because you identify as independent?
Oh, all the time. A lot of people, are horrified when I tell them I would vote for a Republican candidate, and I have in the past. Even some pretty well-known Republican candidates I have voted for in the past. I'm an independent in that I'm like an 80-20 Democratic split. And a lot of people just get so horrified when I tell them, I voted for this Republican or that one. Um, and I just sort of feel like um, I might be excommunicated from this community for speaking my mind. I do have some concerns. Um, I'm very middle ground, middle of the road in my beliefs, and I just think there's positives and negatives on both sides. I
Got it.
have a good about half of my family are Republicans, and they've always treated me with kindness and respect
So you
and
consider
affirm.
yourself like more of a moderate type of person.
Yes, very moderate.
So, and
I'm
I had
not.
asked both Leslie and the senator, I mean, do you believe that these anti LGBTQ bills are creating an unsafe environment for trans people?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because then you're taking away whatever recourse they have to try to find help for themselves in like these bullying type of situations. Now it's sort of saying it's okay to be bullied because of this. I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with Leslie in that the Republican Party, I don't know what happened, but over the past 10, maybe 15 years, has been focused on the wrong things. Um, I do want to hear more about immigration and the economy and inflation and things like that. You're never going to win on these culture wars things.
No, yeah,
Culture
and
change.
I don't want to point out your political affiliation. I just do because people have this idea that if you're a minority group, you're automatically a Democrat, and that's not the case in so many times. I mean, that's not the case in all times, and um, and it doesn't matter, what your political affiliation is to me, but some Democrat people always are shocked when they hear someone is LGBTQ and Republican or independent, and the truth is like the gay community is diverse, so are the communities diverse also politically. Um,
Absolutely.
so I do
I'm
want to
all
move on to our next thing with is transgender woman in sports. And Senator, recently, Nassau County executive banned trans athletes from competing in girls' sports at county facilities. Executive Bruce Beckman stated men are bullying women when he was referring technically to trans women and misgendering them as men.
And now to that breaking news in Nassau County. County Executive Bruce Blakeman announcing a ban on transgender athletes at more than 100 county-run facilities and ballparks. It is the first ban of its kind in the country and is already garnering backlash from LGBTQ advocates. Long Island reporter Shantae Lands was there for that bombshell announcement, Shantae, and you join us now live in Mineola.
Charlene, bombshell is a great word. In fact, backlash, even better. It's over my right shoulder here. You can see the protesters against that new executive order that he signed. I want to get you straight to some video of him signing that order, again, banning transgender athletes from competing in county-run facilities. It is possibly the first of its kind in this nation. Blakeman was joined by female athletes and Kim Russell, who's a former women's lacrosse coach, reassigned at a college in Ohio after speaking out against transgender girls competing against biological females. There was also young girls there, young youth athletes who participate here in Nassau County. Now, what makes it a little bit unclear is the actual school, how school will play a role into this, because if the schools are okay with it, but they can't compete at county facilities, that makes it a little dicey trying to figure out, for example, which track meet or games they can play and which they can't. Either way, the LGBTQ community outraged. Here on the steps, I also spoke with Blakeman afterwards. He says this is the right choice.
This is not precluding anybody from participating in sports. What it is, it's identifying that there are women and girls who spend a tremendous amount of time and effort to excel and compete in their sports that are women's sports. And it is an unfair advantage for someone who is a biological male to compete against a biological female.
What are your thoughts on the fact that this ban was conducted? But what I found more interesting about this is that there was no complaints publicly that were brought before this ban was put into effect. So, you know.
Can you just go back and tell me go through the situation again while I put my thoughts together?
Yeah, sure. So Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman just recently announced that they were banning trans women competing in women's sports to use their facilities.
Yes, which he just, I guess he has the power to just decree a regulation for schools, which I find unusual. But it's the whole issue of children competing in on teams in the gender in which they feel most comfortable just makes sense for those children to be happy to be playing sports at all. And I think everyone immediately jumps to that one of these transgender little girls is they're all of a sudden competing for a gold medal in the Olympics. It's just not like that. We're talking about children who
just want to play.
Exactly. And they feel more comfortable playing in the gender in which they feel most comfortable, which, by the way, maybe they will feel comfortable in that body for their whole adolescence, maybe for their entire lives. We don't know. But at that exact moment, they are playing sports. We should be very happy about children playing sports in the gender in which they feel most comfortable. And so for Bruce Blakeman to make a pronouncement when there's been no complaints about that at all as a preemptive strike is just, he must be ready to announce a very bad budget or something to try to take the attention off to put that on the so that's why I wanted you to repeat it, because when you say it sounds so ridiculous that
no, I agree. I thought what was more ridiculous was that this was put in as a bill, kind of that, like, and there have been no complaints in Nassau County.
Right, there's a preemptive strike against something that's not.
So this to me sounds like political theater.
Totally.
You know, I mean, Josie, what are your thoughts about trans women and women's sports? I mean, this has been a big topic that has been on the news for several months now, a big debate, and that Republicans specifically tend to bring this up. You know.
So my whole thing is, first of all, this whole notion of trans people in sports really hasn't come to the forefront except in the last decade or so, especially when we're talking about like medical and health and like all these different things that really there hasn't been much research into at all. So until we know better,
So
let
you think
people
that
do whatever. What?
so the argument is that trans women have an advantage
Yeah.
because they
Um.
were born cis male, and some that may have gone through puberty may have certain, strengths. I mean, do
um,
you agree with that or disagree, or,
I tend to disagree only because there's a lot that changes with the makeup and biology of your body once you've consistently been on hormones, especially for a given period of time. What I will say, what I'm more in support of, and this might sound a little radical, do away completely with gendered sports and to really focus on people and their abilities.
so you believe
And
sports to be co-ed?
absolutely, because really, men's sports and women's sports has sort of been founded on the foundation of men are better athletes than women, and all this misogyny going back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And we see even with the professional sports, men's sports tend to get more funding, more attention, more advertising than women's sports does. So women's sports in general has always been treated as second class as compared to men's sports. So the best way to be fair for
Is to
everybody, is
have
take
everything
away the
co-ed.
gender out of sports completely.
I mean, I don't think that is going to happen where it's going to be co-ed in all arenas.
It's,
Maybe in
it's not
schools,
gonna.
college and under that are not competitive. I kind of agree. There's no reason to have, um, you know, male and female, and it should be co-ed. When it comes to professional baseball, professional basketball, I don't see that ever going co-ed. But
Oh, it never will because, like I said, it founded basically on misogyny that's gone back since the dawn of humankind. Um, but really, if we want to talk about absolute, actual fairness between the genders and being inclusive of everybody, um, yeah, it should all just be
got it.
co-ed. Like
And Leslie, I mean, what
if you could run the mile fastest, you could run the mile fastest, and it is what it is.
Leslie, what are your thoughts? I mean, there's a lot of even moderate Democratic women that believe that trans women should not be in women's sports.
You
Um,
know what? May I say something? May I go
yes,
ahead and speak?
yes.
And I'll try to sum this up quick. With a good conscience, I personally would not join a women's sports team because I don't want to disrespect women, real female, cisgender women in a sports team. Unfortunately, that's what I think Leah Thomas, that swimmer from the East Coast, did. And that, unfortunately got the ball rolling against us. My personal opinion is, why can't transgender women have a league of their own? I think that if she competed against other transgender athletes, this would not have been an issue and nothing would have happened.
So
Nobody would
you
have
think that
cared.
trans people should have their own lane, so to speak?
I believe that it's like the movie A League of Their Own about a women's sports baseball team back in the World War II days. Why can't transgender women eventually start a league of their own, and everybody, Democrats, Republicans, independents, populists, whatever, will just shut the hell up and just let them have their fun?
I mean, your point of view is similar to Caitlyn Jenner, which is she believes that trans women should not be in women's sports. So I'm assuming you're kind of aligned with that viewpoint.
I'm gonna have. I don't care if I lose friends for saying this, but yes. And
Okay.
speaking of Caitlyn Jenner, Caitlyn is the reason why my family learned to accept me after holding out for almost 20 years on my gender identity.
Okay.
So
Senator,
I
did
owe
you
her
want to
something.
respond to any of that?
I, I'm wondering
Quickly.
if there then would also be a league for transgender men, non-cis men, but transgender men in the same way that transgender women. So now we have 4 leagues: men, women, cis women, trans women. Is that the proposition?
I mean, or maybe, you know,
That is
transgender
that is
people in
that
one
is a good
league, and
idea. You know.
I mean, I don't know what the.
Well, no, I'm just wondering. I'm just trying to think of what it would be like in the.
So Leslie, the senator's asking. I mean, would it be like 4 different lanes? Like you'd have transgender men, transgender women, cis woman, and cis male, or
Well, that's a possibility. That can work.
so you're open
Yeah.
to
Or it
exploration
could be a co-ed
of.
trans thing. Either of the two. Either way.
I think that policy should not be made because of one circumstance or one individual and one circumstance. It should not create sweeping policy that impacts entire leagues. And I'm somewhat familiar with the swimming issue, but I also believe that the facts in that are clouded by who it is that is telling the story, whose narrative it is that's doing that story, and I'm not there. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I don't believe that there is a malintent on the part of anyone on any side of that issue. It's their reality of what's happening in that case. But you should not base all policy on one
person's point of view.
Yes, and one person's not even their point of view, everyone's point of view about that person.
Yeah. I mean, I brought this up on today's episode because I recently did an episode called American Culture War on Gender Identity. And unfortunately, I did not have transgender women at the table during that episode. So I did want to bring this up again to kind of have, the real stakeholders in this issue, which are transgender women, and get their points of view. But I do want to move on. So many red states have been trying to pass bills preventing, transgender youth from seeking gender-affirming care, specifically puberty blockers and hormone treatment. Leslie, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to have to be very honest that I've been transitioning for 27 years, and the Harry Benjamin standards of care, which I think has been ignored for the last 10 or 20 years, they would never think of letting anybody under 18 use hormone therapy.
Okay,
and, my feeling here is, please let me finish. I believe that there needs to be more study on the whole youth transitioning system before we can make any kind of laws. I think that there needs to be more research.
Okay, and Josie, I mean, it's interesting something Leslie brought up, which is the gender affirming models have possibly changed in the last 10 or 20 years. What are your thoughts on the banning of specifically puberty blockers and hormonal treatment for trans youth? Josie?
I do not think anything, especially when it comes to personal decisions between a doctor and a parent and their child, I don't believe government should be stepping into that whatsoever. I do support bringing back the Harry Benjamin rules for everybody of all ages. I remember when when I began transitioning, I was not even given my first hormone pill until I'd done like 6 months of therapy and jumped through all these hoops and hurdles. And I think that it should be a standard for everybody. That's a standard that got thrown out, and now you have like a whole lot of discombobulation in the trans community, um, and we need to bring those back, including for the children. I do believe children should be allowed to transition if that's who they are and that's what's in their heart. That's between child and their parents and their doctor.
I mean, you say that government should not be involved in transgender youth, but some of these people are saying that their parents are child abusive by allowing this type of transition. I mean, we do step in, a school does step in if a child is being abused physically. So if this is on the same level, or some people are saying it's child abuse, I mean, Senator, what do you say
I
about that?
understand if a parent was forcing their child to transition for some sort of reason, that's abusive. But if you're affirming somebody in who they want to be and who they feel they are, that's the opposite of abuse. It would
And
actually be abusive to deny them these services and this care.
I mean, I think a parent is starts from a place of neutrality, and then is sometimes and maybe oftentimes affirming, but no one forces their child to transition as a punishment, and even just the specter of that is odd, and frankly, I think sexist, because I think most people are thinking about men transitioning to cis men transitioning to trans women, or cis boys to trans girls. The fact is that. It's a very, very complicated decision for a child and their family and whoever they choose to bring in to make together. And one of the great failings that we have is that we don't have a lot of people who are very expert in this. They are not accessible to so many families, and even because psychiatry often enters into someone who should be consulted, there are so few child psychiatrists in this country in general that it makes it very difficult to get the best, most expert advice on these things. And I think, as with most issues of parenting, that a parent who makes the decision to be affirming of their child wanting to undergo some of the treatments that would help them transition, they're just making the best decision that they can for their children. You know, parents make a lot of mistakes. They do a lot of good things, and they make a lot of mistakes. It's just the nature of growing up. And I know this is a very high-level thing, but again, I think that most families are just trying to do the best that they can with the resources that they have around them. So it's very difficult to be regulating something where there's no expert.
Yeah, no, I get that. Parents are doing what's in the best interest of their child in connection with their child.
And I don't think they should be
But many
banned from.
feel that,
I don't think they should be banned from doing that.
Many feel that people under 18 really don't know what's good for them yet, or can't make those types of decisions when it comes to things like puberty blockers, or taking hormones, or maybe even late teens like 17, where you're talking about double mastectomies for trans men. Like, a lot of people feel that that's too young of an individual to make a decision. I mean, Josie, what are your thoughts there?
So it wasn't but 30, 40 years ago that it was perfectly acceptable to beat the femininity out of your son and force them to man up and do this and do all that. And that was pretty socially acceptable. That was not considered abuse at all. But now that we're getting to a point where we're starting to accept and affirm children, let them be who they are, now it's a problem. And now we want to call that the abuse, and not what's been happening all these years. Imagine, look at all the trans people since the dawn of mankind that killed themselves because of a lack of acceptance and a lack of affirmation.
Yeah.
But
I
that
mean,
was, but all that wasn't considered abusive. But now that we're actually going to support our children and let them exercise their autonomy over themselves, now they want to call the parents abusive.
Leslie brought something up, which I thought was interesting. She talked about the model changing over time. And there was recently an article in the New York Times that was published on February 2nd called "As Kids They Thought They Were Trans, They No Longer Do." And I'm going to quote the article. It says, "Under the model of care, clinicians are expected to affirm young people's assertions of gender identity, even provided medical treatment before or even without exploring other possible sources of distress. Many who think there needs to be more cautious approach, including well-meaning liberal parents, doctors, and people who have undergone gender transition and subsequently regret their procedures, have been attacked as anti-trans and intimidated into silencing their concerns. So, you know, Leslie had brought up the fact that the model has loosened a lot. And, this is kind of what the article in the Times is talking a little bit about. And Leslie, can you elaborate when you talk about the loosening of the model and on gender affirming comfort?
The gift of gender science is a gift. It's like an invention. It's like the invention of the wheel, the invention of the automobile, the invention of the atomic bomb. For the most part, everybody knows that you can't run over your neighbor if you're pissed off at him and murder him with your vehicle. Everybody knows that if you own a gun, you're not going to shoot somebody who disagrees with you. Unfortunately, the gift of gender science has been abused to a certain point. One of the first examples that I like to mention is the David Reimer case from back in the 1970s. David Reimer was one of a twin. Um, he had his penis accidentally burned off in a circumcision um, incident. And because of that, the parents were conned by a Dr. John Money into, let's transition this boy into a girl. Let's give him Premarin. Let's give him estrogen. Let's give him whatever. Okay. And unfortunately, David never accepted his identity as Brenda. His original name was Bruce Reimer, but they changed it to Brenda. And Brenda was never wanting to be a girl. That was a forced transition because of a freak accident. However, when he decided to go back to being a boy in his teenage years, he chose the name David. But unfortunately, David lived such a messed up life that he ended up committing suicide. Unfortunately, his twin brother committed suicide as well. But that is an example of how the gift of gender changing has been abused. And yes, there needs to be standards of care. Josie, I agree with you. I'm 100% behind a lot of the things you've said tonight, by the way. But unfortunately, a lot of people are just are in it for the money.
So, Josie, I want to ask you specifically as a transgender woman because you walk in those shoes. If someone does question the model, they're kind of, or say that there should be more restrictions, they're kind of labeled as anti-trans and
or a gatekeeper.
Yes. So, what do you
I've
have
been
to say to
called
that?
that a
If
million
someone
times
is
in my life.
questioning the model now, the current model, that they are kind of, there is this kind of you're anti-trans, don't question it, so to speak. I mean, do you agree that the model's changed and that the model's gotten too loose?
Absolutely. Like I said, everything changed from the time that I first began my transition to even now. Even the way my healthcare goes and my interactions with doctors and clinics and so on and so forth has changed.
So I'm gonna actually. So you agree it's changed and it's gotten looser, correct?
Absolutely.
So people are kind of in a way rightful to be concerned about kids because it's gotten so loose, and that may raise concerns. I mean, what are your thoughts there? And I'll come to you, Senator, in a second to see
I'm
your about.
in general concerned with the whole transgender community, not even just separating people by age, in general as a whole with the community, because things have gotten so lax and so open. You're going to have a lot of things popping up in another 10, 20 years. I think those standards were set in place for a particular reason, and I think we need to bring them back or find some sort of middle ground between the way things are now and the way things were. Because I do agree, maybe people shouldn't have gone through as many hoops and hurdles as somebody like me or somebody, that transitioned before me. went through. But at the same time, now it seems like it's an open door, and just everybody is invited to the party.
Yeah. So, Sarah, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
having heard two trans women talk about how the model went from being very strict to now being so loose that these trans women feel like they should tighten up on this model?
I think that everyone's concern is better placed on why there's such a lack of knowledge about appropriate ways to deal with children and adolescents as this issue comes up. Even in the New York Times article, every study, to the extent that they were quoted, they were too small to really to give much information, or the breakdown was 50-50 people on one side of the fence and then on the other side of the fence, and this included lay people and trans people and what they thought and what their youth was like. There just is not enough information about what is the best way to proceed. And again, I go back to, if the option has become more available for parents to work with their children on gender-affirming care, I think it's fine for them to proceed, but not in a vacuum. They absolutely have to bring in those cases, I think, mental health professionals. I mean, there really is there's such we're all talking about what the physical changes are, but really the most important thing is the mental health and what is happening in the minds of the people who are involved in this. And, we don't really treat mental health equally to physical health. We cover it finally now in law, but society does not think of it in the same way. But we just don't have the resources being put into it. And that would provide a lot of answers to what is probably in the best interests of a child, and give more guidance to parents and families and other healthcare professionals, honestly. I know that's pie in the sky, but I really do think the problem is that there just needs to be more information gathered on this before we make sweeping changes.
I used to be anti gender affirming care for kids when it came to hormones and puberty blockers. After doing some soul searching, I changed my mind and kind of realized that, I knew I was gay and different by the age of 4 or 5. And I'm assuming that's transferable for transgender people who may know very early on. And, and I guess having a little faith that people do know about that kind of opened me that, okay, yeah, I'm open to the idea that, they can make their decisions, because, I knew I was different probably by 3-4 years old.
Can I just throw a wrench into? I think also we should look at what has happened to among the most oppressed group of people, and that's intersex children, who, even to this day, a physician will decide what gender that child should grow up in, rather than waiting to see what gender that child feels most comfortable in. That someone is intersex should not be treated as a disability. It should be treated as an opportunity in a way, because we don't know from a baby what gender they're going to be if they're intersex. We just don't know. And for too long, decisions have been made that have made a lot of people unhappy. And I think it would be very interesting to see how it is that they make decisions, and at what age they make decisions about what gender they feel as if they should be living in.
And I mean, I was opposed because I had a negative experience as a child where in the 1980s, my dad injected me with male hormones as a way to change my sexual orientation. And the idea that in the medical community that actually was allowed really raised doubt of me of the medical community. Can we trust the medical community that they're advising parents on the right thing? So that was my reservation, I think, first. But after, like I said, I did some soul searching on the issue and realized that, again, I knew I was gay and different at the age of 3 and 4, and my father knew I was gay and different at 3 and 4, or else he wouldn't have tried that.
Right.
But I also would feel more secure if the model tightened a little bit, because from what I've heard from friends, it has gotten a little bit, like Leslie said, where there people are concerned that there are not enough safe rails guards on it. But I do want to move on to the next thing.
There
Sure.
was one interesting,
30
and
seconds,
there was
Senator.
too many, individual cases and not enough, a lot of data. But of the children who thought that they were gay and they thought that that was sinful, and if they transitioned, then their attraction to the same sex would now become attraction to the opposite sex, and that would make it okay. And that blew my mind. But apparently, that is something that happens in some households. That rather than be gay, they would prefer to have their child have a different gender, so that they would have a heterosexual sex later on in life.
Moving on to my next question. This is specifically for Leslie, since she identifies as a Republican. Last year, Michael Knowles made what I found to be a horrific statement that transgender people should be eradicated. During his speech on a Saturday, who formerly hosted a podcast with Senator Ted Cruz, he said it was for the good of society. Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole prosperous ideology at every level.
Be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
I mean, this is horrific, and I was appalled by it. I was also appalled that no one on the Republican Party called this out. I mean, Leslie, some trans people who hear you say that you're Republican and that this is the kind of Republican rhetoric. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It doesn't speak for all Republicans, because a majority of my friends are Republican and they support me 100%. This lunatic, I'm gonna say him and Ted Cruz are amongst the bad apples in the Republican Party, and Ron DeSantis as well. I'm not exactly a fan. He was the one, to be honest with you. DeSantis was the one I was worried about the most in the Republican election, and who could be our president this year. I'm glad he's out of the race.
Can I ask Leslie Ann a quick question?
I honestly think. Yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
Well, you said that most of your friends are very supportive of you, and most of your friends are Republicans. But I'm wondering if they reach out to their Republican elected officials and say, we believe that transgender people deserve equal rights in society, and that we should not be in any way even proposing legislation that would not only stop discrimination, but in fact make the discrimination even worse. I mean, having friends that are supportive, and I'm a political person, so I know this is where it's coming from. But the more important thing would be not just to tell you that they're for you, but to tell other people that they are very supportive of you, and that is kind of what would make the difference. Would they be willing to do that, do you think?
I think it would be very well appreciated if they did. But there's also a Republican group called the Log Cabin Republicans that I don't think a lot of people are giving a lot of spotlight to. I think they need to be highlighted a little bit more, because the Log Cabin Republicans are an LGBT Republican organization, and they appear at all the convention. I've been to a Republican convention before. I've been to their booth. We've had some wonderful conversations. And I think that we need to speak to those who are members of that group to try to help, get the message across a little bit better that, hey, Republican Party, Lay off of the transgender people. Leave them alone. Leave the drag queen story hour alone. Leave the drag show laws alone. Leave all that alone. Leave the transgender children alone.
And the Log Cabin Republicans is actually a very good example because in the very beginning, they were not so trans friendly, but they were educated. In other words, they were willing to leave trans out of civil rights legislation, et
And
cetera.
so were a lot of
No,
so
I
were a
know.
lot of Democratic
No,
groups too.
All right, one
I'm
person at
saying
a time.
it's a good thing. They changed their mind pretty quickly, so change is possible, and it was a very good thing when they did that. I'm not at all being critical, but there are a lot of Democratic groups that were not so great on trans stuff. Trust me, that's also true. But it does show that people are educable, and it starts with us, shall we say, and then can get out into the greater. Listen, not all Democrats. Democrats were always throwing trans, over the side to try to get civil rights legislation, and it was a disgrace. So they're marginally better than Republicans, but not certainly 100% better. So, but I'm saying there is hope in educating political entities on not permitting discriminatory behavior towards gender people based on gender identity expression.
Yeah, you answered your own question. You pretty much hit the nail right on the head about the Democratic Party. I do appreciate what they're trying to do for social minorities like us, but unfortunately, it's for their own benefit. The Democrats want to use us to get votes. The Republicans want to use us as a target.
So you
Both
feel
parties are guilty of the same problem. Greed.
both parties are using trans people as a football, Leslie.
Yeah,
How about you, Josie?
greed.
What are your thoughts on what Leslie just said?
So I got two things really quick. First of all, when you say first of all, there's a saying that I remember, that the right wing and left wing are both parts of the same bird. So I always keep that in mind when taking a look at things. I remember very clearly about 20 years ago, there was a meeting that the it was national the what's the group with the yellow equals sign, that's the
Human
you know
Rights
what I'm
Campaign.
Human Rights Campaign?
yeah,
Human Rights Commission.
they called a meeting at the New York City LGBTQ Community Center, and they invited all basically like the trans advocates of New York City to this meeting to let us know that, yeah, we know that you want your rights and everything. Right now, our main priority is going to be passing gay marriage, but don't worry, we'll come back for you later on. And look, that's exactly what basically is transpiring.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
at
there's
the end of the day, I don't trust either side completely.
many
So
people
I'm
feel like
just
white gay men specifically left black men behind, transgender women behind. There is this feeling from some of the community of that level. But I do want to do one more question before we close. So the Daily Wire has a host named Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles, and they make a point to specifically attack trans people constantly. Matt Walsh put out a documentary called What is a Woman? Epoch recently put out a film called Gender Transformation. And some of this stuff has like false information too. And like, what are your thoughts that they are going out of their way specifically to attack trans people, and that it's almost like this movement on their part to want to target trans people, and is probably creating to some of unsafety, that this negative rhetoric is creating for unsafe situations. Josie, I mean, what are your thoughts about this right wing movement to attack trans people in the culture war?
Um, First of all, those people and nuts like them will eventually go the way of the dodo. That whole ideology is not sustainable at all. As a society, we're constantly moving forward and evolving our attitudes and beliefs right now, even the most conservative ones that we have right now, aren't the same as they were 500 years ago. We're constantly evolving and changing, and you need to sort of try and get with the program a little bit, or you're going to be left by the wayside. Um, I believe with these commentators, like you'd mentioned, um, I would say they're making things a little more unsafe in that they're sort of galvanizing what's already there and sort of mobilizing what's already there. At the end of the day, do I feel safer as a trans woman in 2024 than I did back in the 1990s? Yes, absolutely. So as a whole, as a society, we are moving forward. But
So you've seen some progress, but we still have ways to go. And Leslie,
oh, there's a way to go for everybody, for every group of people.
Leslie,
There's
and your thoughts on this anti-trans, you know, rhetoric that's out there, specifically coming from groups on the right.
Well, unfortunately, it is protected by the First Amendment because it's freedom of the press. But I think we, as common sense people, trans or not, need to have a rebuttal, and we need to just as they have the unfortunately they have the right to say what they want to, and but that also means that we have the right to say what we want to, and I think we need to fire back by simply, you know, talking about it publicly, making a film, making a story, making something to combat what they are saying. That way, people are not buying their BS.
And Senator, I'll let you.
I was going to say,
get the
we
final
got to
word.
pump up your listenership, and we have to make you much more popular in the popular culture because you are a responsible person. If you let people speak all of their beliefs, but you also are representing a group that's underrepresented, and because of that, they're open to being attacked. So let's get more people to be listening to your podcast,
thank you,
everyone.
Senator. I
I'm
appreciate
serious.
it.
It would be very helpful for society in general. So that's my endorsement.
To me, the media has gotten polarizing, and I really try to allow everyone
Yes.
to be part of the conversation, no matter what their views are. I don't believe in, now I'm losing my train of thought here, working in silos. And I believe that the only way not to work in silos is by hearing each other. But I do want to thank the three of you for being guests tonight.
Thank
you so much.
It's been great.
Thank you, Leslie, Josie, and
You're
thank
welcome.
you, audience. Educate yourself on this topic because it's a very important topic, and just remember there's a lot of false information and rhetoric out there. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also leave me a comment and let me know what you think about this. Thanks so much, and have a great day.